So I would love to introduce Zazie, first of all. So Zazie, tell us a little bit about you. And of course, if those of you who don't know, Zazie used to work at Clear Horizons. So she's a former Clear Horizon person who has moved. She left us in Australia and went to Denmark. I'm still heartbroken, Zazie. So tell us about what you're up to.
Okay, well, I'm still looking forward to you coming over, Jess.
Oh yes, I am. I'm coming over.
Definitely. So since so I moved over pre-pandemic. So had actually it was quite a good place to be, Denmark, during the pandemic. But since moving here, I've mostly been working with system innovators. So with the Rockwell Foundation and some of the work they've been doing, and more recently working with the System Innovation Initiative, which the Rockwell Foundation is funding, and with Penny, actually as part of a DE team with an impact investor. So really different angle on the who the developmental evaluation is for and what for, and also working just with a whole lot of other groups and kind of thinking all the time how much even some of the programmatic work people are doing is really looking at trying to change and transform systems. Yeah, so that's it from me.
Fantastic. So I would also love to welcome Penny. It's been a long time since I've seen you. So you are an impact measurement specialist and strategist and advisor and creative evaluation. Tell us a little bit about you and what you're up to these days, please.
Okay, so hi everybody. For those that that don't know me, I've had quite a mixed career, focused on evaluation, so government in New Zealand, UK. In fact, Kate and I were colleagues back in the mid-90s, working together from different departments on evaluation. I've also worked in philanthropy in the USA, and as Zazie said, more recently in impact investment, which has a kind of global reach. And for those of you who aren't familiar with impact investment, it's basically private money used for public good. Yeah.
I was going to ask you that, so you got there. Thank you.
Yeah. So New Zealand's home for me. I'm a migrant. My ancestors are Irish and Scottish, and I think it's true to say that my heart and spirit are in New Zealand. So I'm just visiting Scotland.
You have to come back this way then, and
come
and visit us on the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys are going to talk about using a layered theory of change to bring together impact, market, and scale to create a framework that can help track impact at a systems level. So we're sort of zooming into a particular tool for a particular context, I guess, here. Yeah, I'm basically handing over you to tell us all about this stuff. Yes, this mystery panel that we're going to have now. This is our mystery session. So do you want to start with the context and the problem you're trying to address with this? Was that where we begin? Yep.
Yeah. I was thinking, Penny, that it probably requires us to give a bit of context on the fund and the developmental evaluation work that we're doing. So I'll start and Penny can, or do you want to start, Penny? You good for me? I'll go. All right. Yeah, you go.
Okay. So basically, the developmental evaluation is working. I guess I could characterize it as where the team is a learning partner for this initiative, which is an impact investing initiative, an impact fund, which is focused on trying to improve the situation and conditions of workers who are working in various parts of the world to produce goods that would feed into, say, the fashion industry. So what this fund is doing is funding early stage ventures or startups who are using new technology to make supply chains transparent and traceable. So what that means is the big corporates who have to date got away with buying off the top of those supply chains and ignoring the situation of workers at the bottom end of it. If you make that transparent and traceable, they can no longer do that without everybody knowing what they're doing and it potentially affecting their business. So that's what the fund is investing in. The developmental evaluation started very, very early in the life of the fund. We've actually been doing this now. We're in our 5th year. We didn't expect it to be this long. Zazie, you joined us in, I think, yeah, that's right, 2 years ago. Yeah. So it's been an interesting journey, and we call it a journey both for us as evaluators, but also a journey for the fund. So I'll hand back to Zazie to give you a few more details on what we're doing.
Yeah, and so we're working with the fund itself on their learning journey and exploring what impact is for them. So developing theories of change and thinking about the measurement, but also their impact management systems. And then we're also working with the investees, so these early startups that are developing technologies that can help to disrupt these supply chains and protect ultimately vulnerable workers from exploitation. So we're working at both levels. What we wanted to share and talk about is how we found the theory of change quite useful in exploring with startups in this case, in particular, what impact means to them and going beyond, I suppose, the impact of the innovation to what that means, what that could mean at a system level. And so in disrupting these supply chains.
Right.
So that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah. So tell me a bit more about how the theory of change worked. Tell me a bit more about that.
Sure. So when, working at Clear Eyes, and as you know, we did a lot of training on theory of change with lots of different stakeholders. And the 3 kind of key things I always used to come back to is that it really helps you with understanding the intent of the work and therefore engaging with your role and position in the system. It helps you to really explore the boundaries of the work that you're doing. And it also helps you to engage with causality, right? So how is it that the work that you're doing is actually going to lead to these positive or hoped for changes? And so that remains really useful in the system change space, but of course things are much more complex and complicated, and you're dealing with much broader kind of map of what you're trying to engage with. And so the way in which the theory of change has been really useful is in surfacing actually how people are thinking themselves about their role in the system and how they're contributing to positive change. And so by listening to how these startups are thinking about that, we were able to kind of surface a model that engages with impact, but also the fact that these are startups and that what they're trying to do is to be successful in the market as well. And then to think at a higher level, okay, what would scale look like? Because there's so many different ways of thinking about scale, and not just as multiples, but what would that mean from a systemic perspective, particularly if you're thinking about the change you can create in disrupting these supply chains and improving conditions for workers, or maybe transforming the system so that it's no longer a problem.
And you say it's layered. Can you just be really, really clear for us what you mean by layered?
Yeah, and layered might be the wrong term. You guys might have a better way of describing it. But essentially, so when you talk to startups, there are quite a few of them, but these are tech startups as well. So just to give a really simple example, speaking to some other startups in another context, in the fashion industry, one particular one had developed a tech that helped to save water in the dyeing process of cotton. And so when they think about their impact, they're only thinking about how much water is being saved. So how much less water are we using? How much are we saving, etc. But then what we were looking for them to think beyond is not just like at that numeric level of how much water you're saving, but what does that mean? And what's the potential of your tech at a systemic level or at a market level? And so Quasar, which is the tech, the startup that we did most of this work with, what they try to do is they've got digital training that they deliver in factories, and with a digital dashboard that helps around the accountability and the tracking of how that training is going. And basically what their training is aiming to do is to enable conversations between workers and their managers in workplaces that improve conditions, right? So they were very good at thinking about that in terms of what that means on the factory floor. But then they also needed to be thinking about, and they already had a lot of this thinking down, but they just hadn't, I suppose, fully brought it into an impact thesis around how do we get that into the market? Why would corporates be interested in this? What are the barriers and incentives for that? And then what could that mean if we were able to, and how would we take that to, many more factories across the system?
Wow. I see what you mean by layered. It's sort of like, I'd love to see a diagram. Is it a diagram, or is it more of a many diagrams?
It's a diagram. And the reason why we decided not to share it is because we did share it last week with Penny.
And Penny fell over.
It's complex. Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
Well, I know, that's one of the things about diagrams in this space, isn't it? Is that you can have workhorse diagrams that mean an awful lot to the people who are building them, but you show them to somebody else, like to our 62 participants, and they might, fall over and go, oh my God, my head hurts. So we understand if you don't want to share it. Yeah,
no, but we can follow up with it, and you can share it with everyone. We've got a kind of non-applied version, if you like, which is just the model and explores that. But then you would need to apply it.
I'd love to. It sounds like this is all about, I don't know if I'm wrong here, but a lot of that you've said so far is about getting really clear on intent and how things playing out. But what about actual measuring, like the performance of the whole thing, or how it's, whether it's working or not? How do you use it for that?
Well, I mean, this is the thing, is that it helps you to actually, because you've got layers that are split, right? So you do have the innovation to impact layer, you do have the startup to market level, and then you do have how is the startup leveraging that to then scale and to make a broader difference than just a few factories. It helps you to then in a way simplify how you're engaging with whether this is working or not, and tracking change, because you can develop indicators at each level that you can then bring together, right? And look at different things. So one of the things that is really important to QuizEye is they want to be really changing things for workers in vulnerable situations. So we can look at whether things are improving in the factory, at the factory level, and then really focus in on geographic areas where they're working, where those things might be worse than in other geographic areas, or particular sectors where there's known to be more exploitation than in other places. So it does help you to engage with impact, as I say, beyond the one-on-one, to really think about it at a significant level, I suppose, for them in this case, across the impact that they're having.
This sounds really straightforward. I mean, honestly.
It is.
So, so I'm going to put this to you, Penny. What were the challenges in reality of trying to take this layered, sort of multifaceted picture, keep it holding this complexity?
Yeah, I mean, what we were trying to do by working through this layered thing is to really do it with both the ventures, but also with the fund, so that everybody was able to think about things in this sort of more global way, really. In terms of challenges, one of the big challenges for this work wasn't so much with the theory of change itself, but it was with the measures, as you asked about, Jess. So these are very early stage startup businesses. So they're so busy actually just trying to build a viable business that to get them to focus on impact measurement at this early stage was actually very difficult. So that was one thing. The second thing is that the fund itself was understanding and patient of that, but the fund is made up from contributions from other funding partners. So some of those were kind of saying, where's the impact? Where's the impact? You know,
where's
the impact for brand new businesses who, you know, so those demands from investors really, what we found we could actually create an obstacle for the businesses themselves to develop, because if they had to divert their attention on trying to measure their progress to satisfy investor or funded demands, they only had enough capacity to do one or the other and not both.
Oh, so that's like, I was reading about that today. They're saying short circuits, these demand for that. Sorry, I got excited.
Yeah, exactly. So we ended up doing a spin-off project which looked at that very earlier on. We used a nautical metaphor on sort of the ventures as ships, and it was called Ventures at the Helm. So we looked at it from the venture perspective rather than the funder perspective, to try and, I guess, sort of give a way of thinking for the ventures, but also kind of educate the funders into what they were doing in asking too early for impact. So if anyone's interested in that, in the Ventures at the Helm, it's a guide. And if you just go immjourney.com, it'll take you straight to that guide if you're interested in learning more about that.
Could somebody pop that in the chat function? Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So that was a long explanation for a simple question.
But I think your point about you know, funders, like, where's the impact, and that came up earlier, didn't it? And it was a question as well that we've had, is like that almost like we're going to have to educate the people involved in this sort of work that they can't have the impact straight away, and if they demand it, they're going to actually divert all the effort in the wrong direction and not get much back, because this stuff takes a long time.
As evaluators, we need to also educate about what exactly is developmental evaluation, because I remember one of the funders saying, why aren't you doing an impact evaluation? You know, and didn't quite understand the learning focus and the developing of evaluative thinking, rather than just sort of plonking top down some kind of, which would indicate failure if you do it too soon.
It indicates failure, but it's understandable, isn't it? Because that's the system that's been in place for a very long time. That is the dominant discourse about evaluation, that you make a plan, you measure stuff, you find out the impact, you know, and it sounds so straightforward, doesn't it? So I have a lot of sympathy with people who don't get it. Where is the impact?
It's kind of a little knowledge is a dangerous thing in evaluation.
But I guess that's our challenge, is how we can communicate this sort of work and the importance of taking a different approach, really, in a way that other people can understand and see the value of. So I guess I'd ask you that on that train for both of you. So let's say that it's not so good at measuring impact in the early stages either. What is the value of evaluation in these sorts of, or evaluative thinking in these sorts of initiatives?
Well, I'll just talk, and going back to the theory of change, because one of the things that I've really found very interesting is that what evaluators are very good at doing is framing. And they're good at, as you were pointing out with Elise earlier, organizing content quickly, right? Looking for themes, looking for structures.
3 categories,
3 categories, I've got the answer. But we're good at that, right? We're good at framing. And so with this deep dive that we did with a few of the startups around their theory of change, and investigations that we did, you know, across the portfolio that fund was doing, we start to see that there are different models of impact, and that some startups, for example, like the example I just gave around the theory of change, starts with the impact of the innovation. But for others, there's not going to be any impact until they've sufficiently scaled. But to understand that, you need to really dig deep and go into what is the model actually, the thesis of how this startup is planning on achieving change. And so then, you know, the conversation around why can't we see impact is quite different, right? Because you're able to say, well, the thesis here is based on scale first before we start to see any kind of impact, right?
So it's about making a really clear argument, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a strong rationale around the impact thesis and theory of change. I think it's problematic, right, in this space, but what it can do is help to surface some of these models and investigate them and articulate them, and then hopefully, you know, with monitoring data, support it with actual results.
And how about you, Penny? What do you think is the value of doing this stuff, as well as making a case and getting people to hang on? Is there other things that evaluation brings?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think one of the observations I'd make is the change that the impact investing fund has gone through while we've been working with them. So their thinking has really developed. It is more evaluative, so that's quite pleasing. And really, they're asking themselves very different questions than they were at the start. They're also, I think, more able to have those conversations with their investors. They're better conversations. They're probably more confident around this measurement area than they were to start with. So, and I think that's part of the developmental aspect of our work with them. Yeah, I'll leave it there. I think there's lots of things that we're sort of still trying to figure out.
And it's time to bring back everybody into the, I know you'll have, we run out of time. So I would really invite the panel members to all of the panel members to come back and join us on this journey that we've been on. Hope you've been drawing the threads between all the parts. I feel like I've been on a real journey from developmental evaluation and Kate's case study to looking at place-based approaches in different parts of the world and having community at the center, and now getting into this crazy multi-layered complex thing, and this issue of where's the impact. I think that that's almost a good place to start, isn't it? Like, where's the impact? So I'd almost like put it to you all, how this piece, this challenge of managing expectations and like setting a new sort of way of understanding progress is really key to this stuff, isn't it? Would anybody like to comment on that? Who would like to have a shot? I might open it to everybody. So how do we manage it? Go, Kate, please. Yeah.
I guess one of the things is that I've been working with a client at the moment where they're very used to having a set of KPIs and some targets. And that's their way of operating, this very business oriented way. And so what we did an exercise where we unpacked the KPIs for them. We unpacked what they were measuring and what people were reporting on. And it revealed to them that 85% of those measures were complete fallacy. Right. So the people were counting stuff because they could. They were filling in the reports every month and every quarter, and they were meeting targets, funnily enough, that they'd set. And nobody really, and the common feedback was that they'd set targets because it felt like a good number. It wasn't necessarily a good thing to do. And actually, when we presented that work to the decision makers, they actually acknowledged that the reports they got every quarter weren't really telling them about the value of what they were doing and what was going on in the organisation. And that's what everybody else told us as well. So I think sometimes you have to call it by suggesting that we just review the current practice and the value that it's really giving them or not, and whether they can really tell what's going on by these independent quantitative measures that lack any validity once you dig a little bit. The construct validity of some of these measures is nil or very, very slim.
And then, of course, you don't often. I just saw something that Elise and I have been working on recently where they didn't achieve their goals. And then we looked at them and they were ridiculous. They weren't the right sort of goals. They were never good. Well, they had to change track because of what they learned. And then the goals weren't achieved. And then the funder went, why didn't you achieve your KPIs? I mean,
people feel really, it's their comfort zone, right? So it's moving people out of quite it's ingrained. It's totally ingrained.
And yet we have to have sympathy. Yeah.
And one of the opportunities that we've got, though, with this systems change work is being able to include all stakeholders, including sponsors, inside the tent of evaluation where we focus. And so I've observed that this management of expectations looks different when sponsors see themselves as part of the problem and the solution and the outcomes that they need to achieve themselves. They've got KPIs on how well they're enabling the work. And so when they're part of being in focus of the evaluation lens, I think it really shifts the dynamic rather than just we're evaluating out here and outside of the system actors. The system actors, including the evaluators, we're all inside focus of like, well, how well are we all doing to do this?
How well are the funders
it's quite different. It's an opportunity to do that.
What do you think about that, Penny, having funders, some of the questions put back on funders? So how are the funders behaving in the system? How are they showing up?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I mean, it is a system. So everything, the funders often don't realize what effect they're having. They think that us demanding certain information is kind of somehow neutral. And so I think raising awareness around every time you demand information, think about what that means for the people, the groups that you're making the ask of. And is that actually helpful? Is it unhelpful? Is it even, you know, harming what there's chances of success, you know? So I think definitely we're all kind of playing in this space together.
And like evaluators need the mirror on them as well. Yeah. We do have a question from the Q&A from Bob Williams. Hello, Bob. I know you can't respond, but hello anyway. So Bob's asking if he's wondering about whether we're starting to create research expectations with clients, but with much smaller budgets and shorter timeframes than traditional economic and social research would do. And do you think there's any consequences of that for our craft? Are we setting unrealistic, I guess, expectations in a different way, a different type of expectation? Yeah, the research expectations.
I think that's an excellent point. And I think the biggest thing we often forget to do, I certainly do, and I see others do it as well, is just positioning our work within this broader spectrum of all of the types of evidence that you might be using, and really considering and sharing and making very clear those limitations as you're doing the work and you're presenting that information to whoever that might be. Definitely, I think needs to be well managed.
And I've got one final question before we wrap up. So, and it's a goodie, right? You ready for this one? Can post-normal evaluation thrive alongside traditional modes of evaluation? And what does it mean to be an evaluator in a world beset with complex and wicked problems? What do you reckon? Can the two, you know, anybody got any insights on that? I know it's a big question.
Yeah, I'll just respond. I think it already is.
Yes. Right, we're already in post-normal. We've tipped over. Yeah.
Feels like it.
Yeah. What does anybody else think? Can the two survive? Do we need traditional evaluation anymore, or should we all be just doing this sort of thing?
Sorry, go on, Frankie.
I think they can coexist. I mean, within the work you're doing, there's parts that are incredibly complex, but then there's also parts that are pretty straightforward. So within a collaborative place-based initiative, you might have projects, or a program might be a part of it, where you could kind of have more traditional like evaluation approaches, but you can't just use traditional. Like you always have to kind of have that systems change place-based approach. But I think within those initiatives there are times perhaps where traditional approaches kind of can be used, because we also don't need to complicate like when things are not complicated, we shouldn't make them complicated or complex. Fantastic. If that makes sense.
Very good point. Thank you so much. And also, like on this point of post-normal, I personally, I'm just going to chip in and break my role as chair and think that there's a massive need for this type of evaluation, because there's a massive set of problems to address, and simple methods are just not going to cut it anymore. Maybe we've done the easy stuff and now we're on to the hard stuff. And there's some really complex places, and evaluation is needed along with all the other roles, not on our own though, of course. We can't save the world on our own, can we? What do you reckon?
I think there's another question in the chat that almost takes us into that space, which is evaluators are getting called on to do a whole lot of work that perhaps they're not trained for. On the other hand, evaluators come to evaluation from many different disciplines. So actually, we come from geography, from biology, from anthropology, from sociology, from wherever it is. Evaluators are an eclectic bunch. And I guess that the challenge of right now is that the demands for us in this complex space are really big. It's not just the technique, it's the cultural, the mind, body, spirit stuff, the whole self, no longer just the technical expert. You know, we've been called on to be much more than what we were ever trained for, and
to step in, hey?
Yeah,
step into the fray.
And Bob's point about, you know, are we creating false expectations, and what are the consequences of that? That's very real. And I think that, you know, the boundaries of our work are expanding, and are we really grappling with what that might mean, or
talking about boundaries, I must honor some time boundaries here. And I just you know, love to thank all of you for such fantastic. I just really settled in and enjoyed that conversation so much. It was such a treat. So thank you so much for joining us on this. And for the participants who have stayed right till the end, an hour and a half, that's endurance. I love it. Well done. I just want to say, yeah, again, if any of you, or you know anybody is interested in doing any of the stuff that we've talked about, don't forget that discount that you can get. Maybe we can put that in the chat. And good luck with this stuff. We need more people to step into this work, I reckon. And so if you're a learner and you're thinking of a career change, come and you know, I think this is a good place to put your efforts. So with that, I think it's time to say good night, or good morning, or good noon. What's the word for good afternoon? Wherever you are in the world, and just to thank everybody. I'd really like to thank the panel so much for this great conversation we've had. And if any of you, I'm going to be in Europe next in November, October. So if anybody's looking for to catch up with me, let me know. And I will say goodbye, farewell, have a great whatever. Thank you so much. Bye bye.